Good morning, everyone. I think we're just waiting a few minutes to let everyone arrive.
Good morning. Welcome to the first meeting of the Health-Related Institutions Formula Advisory Committee. My name is Ed Buchanan, and I am the Program Director for the Health-Related Institutions. Before we begin, I would like to ask that participants observe the following etiquette. Please state your name before you speak, mute your device when not speaking, and keep background noise to a minimum. We are joined this morning by Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board Commissioner, Dr. Harrison Keller. Dr. Keller will now provide an introduction and remarks. Welcome, Commissioner, and please proceed.
Thank you. So good morning, and mostly I wanted to say thank you for your willingness to participate on the committee. Of course, we're directed by statute to convene the committee every 2 years, and I appreciate that it's a big ask, especially given all of the issues that you and your institutions are working with right now to help us dig into these policy issues and provide important input, especially for the legislative process. In particular, I did want to highlight for you that it's a busy time at the agency as well. And one of our initiatives currently is refreshing our state 60 by 30 Texas goals, and especially to better align our state goals with what the state needs now from our Texas higher education institutions. So we're organizing that work around 4 key pillars. One is around broadening the scope of our attention. So the top line goal of 60 by 30 Texas is that by 2030, we'd have 60% of our younger working population to have some sort of post-secondary credential. But of course, we have hundreds of thousands of Texans who are older than 25 to 34 who now need to reskill and upskill us to get back on their feet, get back in the workforce, or advance in their careers. So we need more attention to the needs of adult learners. Also, we're pushing ourselves to focus on those credentials that are especially in high demand. So not just talking generically in terms of educational attainment, but what are those credentials that are going to be especially important for individuals, communities, and the state going forward. Third, it's striking that while we have a governor who put a marker down as a candidate that Texas ought to have multiple public research institutions that are counted among the top 10 in the nation, and this has been a priority for multiple legislatures to bolster our research and development capabilities. Our state higher education goals are entirely silent on that aspect of our mission. So we're considering ways that we can reintroduce attention to the R&D mission into our state higher education goals. And finally, across all of our goals, to be more intentional and visible in our commitment to equity, to make sure that all Texans have the opportunity to participate in and contribute to and benefit from our economic recovery. So the work that you're going to be doing on this committee is especially important, and I'd encourage you to think about how we can better align our finance system for our HRIs with the state's higher education goals, keeping in mind the direction of our current conversations on trying to strengthen those goals and better align them with the state's needs. So again, we've crafted the charges to meet the state's the requirements that are in statute with our broader higher education goals in mind, but there are also some particular issues that we've asked for the committee to consider. So in particular, we're going to ask the group to consider appropriate funding around the Doctor of Pediatric Medicine program being established at UT-RGV, which is going to be the state's first podiatry program. We'd appreciate your recommendations on formula funding for that first in its kind program. So again, I appreciate your time, your dedication to the committee. I know you have a full agenda, so I will leave you to the convening chair and to our staff to kick off the meeting. But before I do that, are there any questions for me that I could answer? So if not, again, thank you for your willingness to serve on this committee. We look forward to working with you. And I'll hand it off to the convening chair.
Thank you very much, Harrison. I appreciate those words and getting us kicked off there. I'm Jeff Burton. I'm with the A&M Health Science Center, Vice President and CFO here. I was chair of the committee 2 years ago. It's hard to believe it's already been 2 years, and here we are back at it again. Unbelievable. I believe the first item on the agenda is for Emily Cormier to go provide some background. Is that correct?
Jeff, I believe it's actually to elect the new chair.
All right. I guess we will do that then. All right, very good. So officially call the meeting to order. I guess let's first of all let's go around and introduce everyone who is on the committee. So if we could just kind of go around and everyone introduce themselves. I first see Tomas is the first window on mine. So if you would introduce yourself and the school you're representing.
Good morning, everybody. Tomas Fajardo, MD Anderson Cancer Center.
All right. I see Dr. Lang.
Hi, Jeff. This is Rick Lang. I'm president of Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center in El Paso.
All right. See Angelica.
Good morning, everyone. Angelica Marine Hill, Vice President for Government Affairs and Policy at UT Southwestern.
Great. All right. Next to see Jenny.
I'm Jenny Gomez-Leon. I'm the Vice President and CFO at UT Health San Antonio.
Great. Penny.
Morning, I'm Penny Harkey. I'm the Executive Vice President for Finance and Operations here at the Texas Tech University Health Sciences Center in Lubbock.
All right. Lauren.
Good morning, everyone. Lauren Shear, VP for Health Policy and Legislative Affairs at UTMB Galveston.
All right. Next I see Emily. She's with the coordinating board. And then I see Mike.
Good morning. I'm Mike Tremani. I'm the Senior VP and CFO here at UT Health in Houston.
Great. Next, see Dwayne Morris.
Good morning, Dwayne Morris. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at the University of Texas at Austin Dell Medical School.
Great. Rick?
Yes, Rick Anderson, Executive Vice President at University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley.
All right. Chris?
Chris Kavash, Senior Vice President, CFO, T Health Science Center in Tyler.
All right. Chuck?
Good morning, Chuck Fox, Vice President, Finance and Planning at UNT Health Science Center.
Wonderful. I think that gets everyone on the committee. Did I miss anyone? I think the rest are guests from the coordinating board and such. All right. I do know that Dr. Paula Myrick Short from the University of Houston College of Medicine is on the committee, but she was unable to be with us today. Their Board of Regents are meeting, and she's in the middle of all of that. So wish her luck there. All right, the next order of business here is for us to nominate and consider who we want to be the next chair for the Formula Advisory Committee going forward this round. Do we have any nominations?
Jeff, this is Chuck Fox. I'd like to nominate Michael Tremani to be the chair.
All right. Mike, you okay with that?
Sure. I'm relatively new. That seems to be the trend. It's
All right, rope in the new guys. That's how I was brought in. All right. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'd be happy to second that motion.
Great, thank you, Tomas. Any discussion? All right, if no discussion, I think all in favor say aye.
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 Any dissenting votes? Say nay. Hearing none, it sounds like we have unanimously elected our new leader in Mike Tremonti, and I appreciate that, Mike. And I will now turn the meeting over to you.
okay. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the committee's unanimous endorsement for this coveted position. I believe the next order of business is to request nominations for the vice chair.
And I'd like to nominate Jeff Burton as vice chair.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lang. Any discussion or questions regarding Jeff's appointment? Okay, hearing none, if I could ask for a vote for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Congratulations, Jeff.
Thank you.
I will lean on you heavily.
All right.
Okay. Lastly, from a position standpoint, we have the secretary role, and I'd like to open to the floor nominations for the secretary position.
I would like to nominate Chuck Fox for the role of secretary.
Okay, do I have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, great. And any discussion or questions regarding Chuck's appointment? Hearing none, if I could call for a vote, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any clamoring to take that role? It's a okay, hearing none. Chuck, congratulations.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Look forward to working with you.
Likewise.
Okay. So next on the agenda, I'd like to introduce Emily Cormier, our Assistant Commissioner of Funding, to give us a little overview of the health-related formula funding.
Thank you. I think as all of y'all know, as being seasoned members, we spend a few minutes at this intro meeting just recapping the formulas very quickly and then what happened during the last legislative session. So if we move to the next slide, I can just start with just a couple very basic overview regarding the formulas that we're all very familiar with, but just to cover them. The formulas are designed to obviously provide the legislature with a way to equitably allocate the amount of funding that's available for institutions, Formula funding composes the majority of the appropriations that institutions receive from the state. And during session, the legislature divvies up the amount available for the formulas using data provided by you to the coordinating board. This results in a rate for each formula, depending on the applicable metric related to each of them. And institutions directly receive this formula funding as part of a lump sum appropriation in the Appropriations Act. This means that the way the formula funding is provided to an institution is not a requirement on how the institution must spend their state funding. So moving to the next slide. We've listed briefly the main formulas that fund the HRIs, and on here I'll briefly cover each of them. So the instruction operations, or I&O formula, is predominantly to support instructional and institutional support. The I&O formula is driven both by semester credit hours and by headcount, depending on the program. So medical and dental programs are driven by headcount, while all other programs such as pharmacy, nursing, etc., are based on semester credit hours taken that are converted to a full-time student equivalent. These full-time student equivalents are then weighted to reflect the differences in cost to educate the different students in different programs, with medical and dental being weighted at the highest and allied health being weighted at a rate of 1. This weighting has been static for each biennium except when the legislature has added a new program. Additionally, the I&O formula includes a small class supplement intended for remote locations that have an enrollment of less than 200 students. The infrastructure support formula is to provide for your physical plant and utilities cost. And this is based on the predicted square feet. And that amount, the predicted square feet, is calculated annually by the coordinating board through the space projection model. And so this takes into account semester credit hours taught, faculty staff size, research expenditures, and other metrics, and is intended to be an equitable assessment of space need without looking at actual square footage. However, I would note that for the health-related institutions, it does account for actual square footage for your clinical operations. The research enhancement formula is as it sounds and is intended to foster increased research capacity. All institutions receive a base amount and then a percentage of your most recent research expenditures. Graduate medical education, or GME formula, is to support your medical residents and for faculty costs relating to GME. This is based simply on your number of medical residents in an accredited program as of September 1 in the fall of the year prior to the legislature meeting. Lastly, there are a variety of mission-specific formulas, and if we can move to the next slide, we've listed them here just for reference, and you can see that they vary depending on each institution, from cancer center operations and chest disease to research or board of health. And moving to the next slide, we've just included a brief overview of what occurred for the FY 22-23 biennium compared to the 2021, looking at both the appropriations for each formula and the rates that resulted from it. So across the 4 main formulas, there was an increase of about 80 million, and that was done to maintain the rates between the biennia. Research enhancement dipped just ever so slightly. And I would note for the mission specific, while it appears that there's an increase of almost 76 million, this is actually the result of 4 new formulas being added to the mission specifics. And those amounts, those appropriations had previously been given to those institutions as non-formula support items, so they don't appear in the appropriations column for FY 20 and 21. And then moving to the next slide, just as a brief reminder of what your timeline is for the formula funding recommendations. So obviously it begins now with these committee meetings in the fall, with the intention that the committee's recommendations will be sent to the commissioner and then ultimately to our board next spring. And then we have a requirement to provide recommendations to the LBB and the governor's office by June 1st. And just to note that institutions will begin reporting their preliminary base year data starting next spring, and then the final base year will begin next summer. Moving to the next slide. we can end just with a listing of the charges that you've been given for this upcoming biennium. And so at this point, I'm happy to take any questions, or I can turn it back over to the chair to move on to the next agenda item.
Okay, hearing none. Well, thank you, Emily.
Mike or Emily, will you all make those slides available to the committee following the meeting?
That'd be great. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is the consideration and discussion of the commissioner's charges. Some are a little easier to deal with than others. If you don't mind, I'd like to start with the second charge, which is the consideration, discussion, and possible approval of the current INO formula weights and determination of whether new weights should be requested. So with that said, I'd like to open it up to the floor for any recommendations, comments, so on.
Good morning. This is Lauren Shear with UTMB. One of the things that was brought to my attention was the allied health weight and the fact that all of allied health is at a 1.0. And would it be appropriate to look at, say, separating graduate versus undergraduate allied health and increasing the weight for the graduate allied health programs? I don't know if we really want to get into an in-depth discussion about that today, or if it would be more helpful to maybe have the coordinating board staff run some numbers for us for what the added cost for that would be. We were looking at possibly the weight of 1.018, which is biomedical sciences. I'm certainly happy to have a discussion whether that's the appropriate increase for those graduate level students. But I think the other big caveat there is that if we were to make a change the way that the associated increase in funding be provided to the formulas, so it's not a same pot reallocation that happens, that there is an increase in the funding to support the increased weight. So it may be helpful in that sense to get some numbers for statewide, what the added cost would be for increasing that weight.
Right. Okay. From what I can see, this isn't just a UTMB issue. This is, many of us have allied health programs, and looks like largely, a good percentage of the FTSCs are associated with graduate programs. So obviously it would benefit a number of the institutions involved here. Do I have a second for this recommendation?
I'll second that charge.
Thank you, Jenny. I'd like to open it up for discussion or any questions. Okay, the one thing I would recommend is again, we can put it on the next meeting agenda to allow the coordinating board to run some numbers, like you said, put together an estimate of what that additional cost is. The move to the graduate biomedical rate is a pretty not limited jump, so it's not really dramatic in that respect. Can I go ahead and call for a vote? So those in favor of bringing that forward for the coordinating board to do the analysis, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none.
Lauren, Michael,
go ahead.
Lauren, just a quick question, and just for clarifying for the coordinating board, do you want them to just look at graduate and undergraduate, or do you want them to look at different allied health programs, graduate, undergraduate, in terms of the numbers that you're wanting?
Well, this would be, and we could certainly have that discussion, whether it's, certain programs within allied health that maybe have more of a clinical focus and obviously higher cost. I was thinking in terms of ease of keeping undergraduate at 1.0 and just increasing graduate to the 1.018. But I would certainly, be welcome to have a discussion about, whether it's certain programs like PA or graduate level respiratory therapist, that sort of thing that we know, similar to the commissioner's remarks earlier, are in high demand for the state.
So in addition to just looking at graduate versus undergraduate, what we'd ask the coordinating board is also to at least tell us where the graduate programs in various allied health, so that if you decided you wanted to look at that for clinical, you'd have that information available. Okay.
That would be helpful.
Great.
Okay, I think I'm hearing an amendment to the motion.
Actually, not an amendment. I think we had requested the coordinating board to provide that information. So I just wanted to clarify to the coordinating board what information that you might find most helpful. So
Sure.
Not trying to make it any more complicated or amendment, but just when you come to the next meeting, we'd have all the information you needed to make a decision.
So let me, I guess, ask Ed, do you have that discipline breakdown on allied health?
I have the graduate, undergraduate breakdown is readily available. To break down the disciplines would require some additional data runs, and those disciplines would be, if that's the committee's wish, it would probably be helpful to specify which disciplines you want, because as I recall, historically, it's like a list as long as your legs. So,
okay. So, is there a desire of the committee to go to that next level, or with this being sort of the first pass, do we keep it at just a graduate undergraduate break?
I wouldn't mind seeing it, at least for some of those more clinical programs. So maybe we can isolate it to clinical type programs. And I don't know how easily that narrows the field down, but
okay. So Ed, is that information that we need to provide to you from the individual institutions? Would that be helpful, or?
I'll have to get with our EDC folks and see what their capability is to identify clinical programs. I just, at this point, I can't answer that question.
Sure.
I wouldn't be opposed to providing, the specific narrowing of the list that we would be interested in.
And we could.
I would support that, narrowing the list to primarily clinical oriented programs.
Okay.
I'd like to see it though for all graduate programs, to see just what's in the category of graduate programs, because we're going to start looking at two different scenarios of where we're going to focus on clinical, or are we going to just focus on the graduate programs? What are the differences in those two? Because I think that'll be where we'll be looking at the differences.
Okay.
So we're only interested, Ed, in the breakdown, or I'm only interested in a breakdown of graduate programs by discipline, by discipline, I guess you would say.
Understood.
And this is Angelica. I would support that level of breakdown as well, particularly because there are so many different approaches to funding clinical costs among the different institutions. So, we might get apples to oranges.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it sounds like we have a fairly uniform desire to have Ed provide additional analysis at the graduate discipline level. Let me, can I ask for, and I'll say that's the recommendation. Is there a second for that recommendation?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any further discussion, or have we covered all the bases? Okay, if I can have you all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, any opposed? Okay, and I only thought that was easy. Okay, that we'll move forward then. Ed, sorry to we're starting out a little tough here. Okay, so the next charge that I'd like to address, and let's see if this one gets any easier, is charge 3, and that's the consideration, discussion, and approval of current I&O programs and determining of whether any specialties need to be assigned separate weights. I think we've somewhat covered that from the allied health position, but is there any others that we should be considering?
Mike, is there further delineation on the meaning of specialty programs? Either from the coordinating board or in the material here?
I did not see any specifics. I don't know if Emily or Ed, there was any specifics regarding that charge as to the driver of that.
No, that is just the standard charge, for the committee to determine if any disciplines need different weights. I mean,
Okay. Okay. So, well, again, much like what we're doing with allied health.
yes.
Okay. Again, any recommendations for others before we move on?
Meaning others that would be included, right? Because it's a little bit different from the charge before it.
Correct.
As the word inclusion as well. So in general, this is to make sure there aren't any new specialty programs that we think should be scoped in.
Correct.
I think this was still kind of along the line of when biomedical informatics was added. So it would be something like along those lines.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay. Hearing none, we will move on. Let's jump into charge 1, our recommendations for appropriate funding levels for I&O infrastructure, research enhancement, graduate medical education, and mission specific. One of the things that we've generally had in prior years is to have the coordinating board put together projections of using some standard growth factors to give us an idea of the dollars involved potentially of additional funding. Ed, if you don't mind, if I could get you to give us a little insight as to that, the approach that you use. Ed,
Okay. In regard to the methodology used for the metrics estimates, for all the metric estimates, we've used the 3 previous biennia metrics and forecast 24, 25 based upon that based upon that 3-year base period. For the INO formula, that projection was done at the most detailed level that we have. It was done by discipline, as you see when you look at the breakdown of the INO formula. And the others are much more, simplistic than the INO formula. But that's methodology is consistent with what's been used for the last 3 or 4 formula advisory committees.
Okay. So with that said, and Ed, this is done at a macro level, correct? To basically give us a bottom line increase of funding based on growth. Is that correct?
Yes. In other words, we do for the FTSC formula, we project at the discipline level, and then the overall growth rate that we projected would be the 5.17. Now, that being said, that's the overall total of the growth, but it was done on an individual by individual discipline. Gotcha. And then in terms of pricing, once the committee determines a rate and determines that they want that particular growth rate, then we would put a price to it, so you have an idea of what the what the total package would be.
Okay. So I guess the key question to the committee is, are we comfortable with Ed moving forward along those lines to go ahead and give us our first pass from a growth standpoint? Or are there any other approaches that come to mind?
This is Tomas. I'd be supportive. I think the consistent message of the committee for the past couple of bienniums has been very successful.
Okay.
Mike, would you like for me to go through the projections formula by formula?
If you don't mind.
Okay, for the projected FTSC growth for the INO formula was 5.17%. The projected infrastructure square foot growth for the infrastructure formula is 9.23%. The projection for research expenditures for the research formula was 16.51%. And the projected GME residents for the GME formula is 2.79.
Okay. So with that said, hearing no other recommendations, can I have a motion to move forward with these rates?
So that would be maintaining what I understood Ed to say is to maintain the current rates. That is just to fund growth, correct, Ed?
Yes, that growth percentage is our projected estimate of the growth in each of those metrics.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we'll get to the rates shortly. Next, so let's talk growth first. So do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you, Angelica. Any other further discussion on this? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, Ed, we'll move forward with those growth factors.
I would like to get a point of clarification in regards to determining growth when we break out the allied health graduate programs, being that the project assuming those were broken out from allied health, I would be projecting, 2 rows essentially of allied health for each institution. So those projections might vary slightly since that's being disaggregated a little bit. Is that approach acceptable to the committee?
Well, it's I guess it's somewhat putting a macro measure against a micro element, but absent, individual schools looking at individual programs, I think it'd be difficult to handle it any differently. But again, if somebody has another approach in mind, please speak up. Well, Ed, I think we can use the same 5.17.
Okay, well, we'll just use, I guess what I'm saying is when I disaggregate those and rerun the projections, that may vary slightly. So, because I guess what I can do is disaggregate the FTSC for allied health and, I'll have to look at perhaps we can discuss that further. And when I get into it, I'll may be able to provide a more specific answer.
Okay. Okay. So the meat of the committee's actions always revolve around the funding rates. As was shared earlier, the 22-23 funding rates for INO was $9,622. Infrastructure formula, $6.14. Expenditure formula, 1.17 of research expenses, and the GME formula at $5,970. We have previously have targeted the 2001 as a goal to aspire to. However, I'd like to open up the floor to recommendations on suggestions on rate targets.
So Mike, I have some thoughts just to kind of give a little bit of a different approach, and considering where we are in the economy and that sort of thing, if we shouldn't really come into the next legislative session focused on CPI inflation, because I did some, especially since we've had the same rates for 2 years, and we could say that, yes, we are very grateful for growth, but we know that inflation was not funded. And so just looking at the calculator on the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, if you run what September of 2019 compared to now, the rate for the 9,622 would actually be 10,231. And I expect that will continue to potentially to even climb further between now and next legislative session. So we might be able to use some sort of a justification of, the best would be the CPI since September of 2019.
Okay.
Penny, was that CPI or medical CPI you're using?
It was not, it was CPI.
If my memory serves me correct, medical CPI is higher even. And it may be more appropriate, obviously, for what we're dealing with.
It could be.
Okay. So I'm hearing a recommendation to use 2019, I believe, as a base year to then apply, I guess, the medical CPI and to determine the calculated rate for the 24-25. So effectively extending it out for the two future years. Do I have a second for that approach?
Mike, just one more. Oh, pardon me. Just one more clarification, just to make clear, that would be on top of the growth. And we want to.
Correct. Yeah, independent factor.
So Mike, I think I'd like us to consider both, just more of a third CPI and the medical,
Okay.
Certainly the medical is going to be higher, but I could also see that we may get some push that we're kind of a hybrid, right? A lot of our costs are, clinically oriented, but we also are in an academic space. So
okay.
I don't know, is there a CPI specifically for academics? I know there's a clinical one because we use it in our contracts, but.
There is a higher education price index.
Okay.
So maybe higher ed, clinical, and general, also maybe focused on our various regions, or at least Texas as a whole, the Southwestern Index, for example.
Well, okay. So boy, this is a tough role. It's thanks, Jeff. It's a I think regionalizing it becomes a lot more difficult, given the fact that we're blanketing the state.
I'm sorry, I didn't say that correctly. I meant just making sure we're looking at a Texas index as opposed to maybe a nationwide.
Okay. Although nationwide may work to our favor if, but I'm so I can appropriately amend the recommendation. So we're going to ask Ed to use again, I'm good with 2019, correct? Okay, well, that's our base year. And then we'll look at it on a couple of 3 or 2 potentially CPI rates, I guess 3. So you've got the clinical CPI, the health or the higher education CPI, and then I guess the general CPI, and to come up with the various rates and look at it from a Texas perspective. So if I frame that correct, can I get a second?
I can second that. I think it makes sense. My only comment, whenever we get to the report, I think we need to add a little chart that measures the historical high water marks, just for a reference point. But I think the calculations, I think it makes sense to go second, the inflation route.
Okay, thank you, Tomas. Any other discussion? I sort of got out of sync here. Okay. Hearing none, can I have a vote to approve moving forward with that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I think we have unanimous. So we'll move forward with that. So Ed, you still alive over there? We haven't lost you, have we?
No, you haven't.
Okay. The challenges of virtual meetings. Okay, the last charge to be addressed is the consideration and discussion of formula funding for the planned Doctor of Podiatric Medicine degree. And Rick, if you wouldn't mind, if you could provide a little background on that.
Yes, thank you. We have gone forward with a proposal approved by the coordinating board for a new program of podiatric medicine. It would be the mission and support here would be aligned with our School of Medicine. So essentially what you're looking at is the first 2 years of their program. Other than a few little classes and other stuff would be the same as our medical students. And that then, you know, the other 2 years, and again, podiatric medicine, if you know a little bit about it, is very much structured like a MD or a DO program. And my recommendation, I guess, is to recommend a subcommittee that looks at this and makes a recommendation to the full committee about what weighting we would recommend as a committee as a whole. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Questions from the committee? Okay. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry.
You may have said that and I didn't catch. Do we have any idea of the size of the program and what its planned growth is?
We had recommended, coordinating board, we had recommended a class of 40. So the total size, of course, at full strength would be at the 160.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Okay. So is the committee comfortable appointing a subcommittee to do somewhat of a cost study to determine the appropriate rate? Okay, if I can, we'll go ahead and if I can get a second for that, we'll go ahead and move forward with that approach.
Mike, before you do that, can I suggest that perhaps you call it a work group and not a subcommittee?
Okay.
Good with that approach.
So Ed, do you think they'll work better if you call it a work group as opposed to a subcommittee?
Not necessarily. I think
only kidding, Ed. Only kidding.
Ramifications on record keeping.
Okay.
Only kidding.
I'll amend the motion to a work group to address the cost and potential factor for weight for this program. Do I have, and Dr. Lang, is your second still good?
Yes, sir. It's good.
Okay.
Mike, before we vote, can Rick may have mentioned this, but the question is, we have medicine and dental that are funded on head count. Then would this work group also be identifying whether this would be funded based on head count or semester credit hours? Because that's really,
this is a head count profession, you know, so I would recommend we look at it from a head count perspective.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so with that said, all in favor of moving forward with the work group?
Aye.
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 Okay, we will move forward with that. Rick, obviously we'd like you to share that work group. And we'll look for volunteers to participate. Do I have anybody willing to work with Rick on this? Dr. Lang, okay. Don't be shy. Anybody else? Okay. At this point, Rick, if I'll have you and Dr. Lang, if y'all could move forward, and if obviously if there's other folks within your program that you'll need to involve as well to get some of the details.
Mike, I'll volunteer to be a part of that.
Okay. Thank you, Penny.
And I'm sure Dr. Short would volunteer if she was on the call.
Well, we'll certainly give her that opportunity. Okay. Last item on the agenda is dates. And I have to admit that the week of the September 20th, I am going to be out of town and unavailable. I was hoping that we could potentially move that meeting to the week of the 13th, so possibly September 14th. Would that present any problems?
It would be.
Okay. Any issues with any of the other dates? Okay, so
I think Dr. Lang and I have a conflict on the 13th with a board retreat.
Okay.
With our board, so of October.
So October 12th better?
Yes.
Penny, is that okay with you? The rest of the committee, October 12th? Everybody good with that?
Mike, can you clarify, are you wanting September's meeting on the 13th or the 14th?
I'm sorry, on the 14th.
Okay, thank you.
So September 14th and now October 12th.
And same time, right, Mike? 10?
Same time.
That works.
Works for me.
Okay.
I'm sorry to chime in late. Any chance we could consider September 16th versus the 14th?
Let's see, September 6th. I'm fine with the 16th if that works for everybody. Okay, so Ed, slide amendment, September 16th.
Thank you.
Okay. Does virtual meetings work for everybody? Okay, I don't hear anybody fighting to come to Austin, so it's let's move forward with a Zoom meeting for the 16th.
And Mike, on November 9th, I have a accreditation site visit I'm doing for another institution on November 9th. Would anybody be amenable to moving it to the 8th or to the 16th?
Okay.
It's not all about me. I just want to.
No, it's, I think at this stage, this is the time to bring it up. And the more we can have the committee members available, the better off we are.
Either of those days would be better for me as well.
Yeah.
16th would be great.
Okay. So we'll move November's meeting to the 16th. Ed, is any problems from the coordinating board end?
Well, not that I know of at the moment.
Okay. Well, let's obviously, if when we meet in September, we can adjust if need be. But let's go forward with those dates. So we have, just to repeat everything, we have September, let's see, September 16th. We have October 12th. And now November 16th. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
10 a.m.
I feel like I've really accomplished something here. So, okay. Any other items to address this morning?
I have one item. And it's to kind of let the group know that I'll be taking another position at a health sciences center in South Carolina, at Medical University of South Carolina, coming up in here in November. And what I'm going to recommend to the coordinating board, to Ed and the coordinating board and to you all, is that my vice president for finance and operations, Michael Miller, who's been here a couple of years, has been at Texas Tech, at UNT, and it was with the coordinating board, has been on the committee before, essentially replaced me on the committee as a representative for UTRGV.
Okay. Would it be safe to say you'd work with Michael in the short term on the work group?
Yes. That would be safe to say, and he's listening in on the conversation, so we have appropriate overlap and other things today. And like I said, he's been on the committee before. He's actually chaired the committee, I think, in the past. So he comes with a lot of wealth of knowledge of Texas, the funding formula, and of course now UTRGV and podiatry.
Okay. Ed, I'm assuming that's really beyond the committee's purview, but something that will ultimately be blessed by the coordinating board themselves, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I'll be putting this in writing to the coordinating board. Okay. I just wanted it because the public announcement's probably going to go out either this week or early next week. I wanted to make sure the committee was aware of my transition.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that update, and Rick, I wish you well. Okay. Any other bombshells? Hearing none, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Okay. Make the motion.
The meeting is adjourned. Thank you for staying with me this entire time.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.
Y'all have a good day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.